Welcome back to Argo, everyone. I'm D-Rec, and today I'm going to be covering my standard Kagero deck profile featuring all of the new cards from set 1 and the trial deck. So if you guys end up enjoying today's video, be sure to leave a like and click the bell button to subscribe for future content, because I always want to do more content, and that's what I'm doing. So going into the deck profile now, of course we're going to be starting with the imaginary gifts. So 2 Kai, 1 generic, and then the start deck force markers. If you were able to go to Springfest or any of the caravans around the country, you were able to pick up a start deck with 3 copies of the start deck gift marker. Going into the deck profile now, our starter of course is going to be Lizard Runner Undu. He's the only one we have, and he's from the trial deck, so he's pretty darn accessible. When his skill reads, when rode upon, draw a card. Pretty simple, straightforward, nothing to explain there. Next up, our trigger lineup is pretty generic. We play 8 crits, 4 draw, 4 heal. I do like that they made draw triggers perfect cards. It frees up 4 slots in your grade 1 lineup and gives more utility to draw triggers other than their draw trigger ability. So good on Bushiroad for making that change. I can definitely agree with it and get behind it. So moving into the grade 1 slot now, we're playing 4 copies of Bar. Generally, he's a great card from the trial deck. He's base 8k, and his skill reads, when placed on rearguard circle, you can counter blast 1, soul blast 1, choose one of your opponent's grade 2 or lower rearguards in the same column as him and retire it. Then if you have more rearguards than your opponent, he gets plus 5k for the duration of the turn. Really good magic number wise, especially by himself. He's a 13k base for a turn, and then as an 8k booster he helps hit magic numbers across the board, so really solid at 4. Next up, 3 copies of Aramo. His first skill gives him plus 3 as a booster, so he becomes an 11k booster. And then his second skill, when your opponent's rearguard is retired during your turn, you can retire him to draw a card and countercharge 1. I'm waiting on my 4th one to come in, so keep that in mind. 4 is pretty essential for this card because it helps you with resources, but 3 is like bare minimum, I would say. So 3 copies for now, but it can be bumped to 4. Next up, 3 copies of Dragonic Gaias. He's going to get bumped to 2 once my Airmo comes in, but for now at 3 he's been pretty darn good, and I'll explain why later. So his skill reads, when you boost a grade 3 or greater unit, counter blast 1, push him to the soul, and the boosted unit gets plus 1 critical until the end of that battle. So you'll lose the boosted power, but the extra critical is pretty darn threatening, especially if the attack is already darn big, so really helpful for that aspect, and just putting on pressure if your opponent's at 2 or 3 damage. Next up, 2 copies of Great Bombing of Hellfire. Really solid against Excel and Protect decks, because when she attacks a Vanguard, if one of your opponent's rearguards was retired during that turn, she gets plus 10k power during her battle. An inherent 17k attacker against Protect and Excel decks that have 12k base grade 3s, you're looking at an attack that's going to hit regardless, and it's just really solid. However, against a Force deck, you're going to need a little bit of a help with her, which is why in front of an Airmo, who is an 11k booster, makes her a 28k attack when her skill is active. So you're looking at a 20k guard against a Force deck, and that's just pretty darn good overall. So her at 2, she could be at 3, but for me 2 is pretty comfy cozy. And then lastly for grade 1s, 2 copies of Dragon Knight Burge. He can be bumped to 1 to play the 3rd copy of Hellfire, but at 2 he's been pretty useful, primarily against Royal Paladin decks because they spam a field. If your opponent has 4 more rearguards, you can counterblast 1, push into the soul, retire 1 of those rearguards, and then choose one of your own, and it gets plus 10k power for the rest of the turn. Throw this on a Bar, or throw this on a Hellfire, or whatever, and it's just that much more powerful. So really solid, good retire option, but again, pretty situational, so 1 to 2 is like the max I would recommend playing of him. Moving on to grade 2s, 4 copies of Nihalm. When placed on rearguard circle, you can counterblast 1, retire 1 of your opponent's rearguards in the back row, and then he gets plus 5k for the rest of the turn. So throw this in front of a Bar, and you're looking at a 23 to 28k attack with the skill active, or just an 18k generic attack in general. So again, hitting for magic numbers, looking for that extra little beef in power, and can force extra cards out of your opponent's hand than necessary. So really solid, really helpful, works with the magic number aspect, and a good retire option for the deck. Next up for grade 2s, 3 copies of Spillover Dragon. Another good retire option and a great way to fill soul. When he attacks at the end of that battle, that he attacks a Vanguard, and he was boosted, you can counterblast 1, push into the soul, choose one of your opponent's grade 2 or lower rear guards and retire it. Great way to snipe front row rear guards or boosters or whatever, and it helps fill soul, so cards like Bar have soul target, and stuff like Dragonic Overlord have soul target as well. Moving on to our next grade 2 slot, 2 copies of Berserk Dragon. Most people play him at 4, simply because he is a really good card, but personally I've only ever found him fully utilizable on Vanguard Circle because of his first skill. When placed on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, you can counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. Then, if he was placed on Vanguard Circle, draw a card. Really helpful for drawing cards, but aside from that, as a 13k attacker on Rearguard Circle with his skill, I prefer to have my bigger, beefier attacks over an attack that can just barely hit, and with any other booster in this deck, lose to a defensive trigger. So, he does hit, but nothing power synergistically wise helps him get over that gap of 10 to 15k shield or more, and I think that's where he kind of falls off. So 2 of him, but you can play up to 4 if you want for the retire option, and I guess the power option, but aside from that, I'd rather play a card that works synergistically with the rest of the deck and gets a little bit more power that can help when necessary for getting over that extra amount of guard. Lastly, for grade 2s, 2 copies of Dragon Armored Knight. I play 2 of him over the last 2 copies of Berserk Dragon because he works synergistically with all of my grade 1s except for Hellfire and Burge. When he attacks a Vanguard, if your opponent has 3 or less rearguards, he gets plus 5k until the end of his battle. 15k in front of Bar, 23k attack. That's a 15k guard, doesn't lose the D trigger, and is just good generally. Good attacker, and helps hit magic numbers. Me choosing him over a full playset of Berserk Dragon is the trade-off between having an extra retire option and having an attack that can mean the difference between 5k shield. So, 2 copies of Dragon Armored Knight. Now on to grade 3s, 3 copies of Dragonic Overlord. He's going to be your first grade 3 ride target simply because his skill is usable whenever, so long as he's on Vanguard Circle, of course. His first skill is usable on either Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, and it says, acts once per turn, you can Soul Blast 1 to give him plus 10k power for the rest of the turn. His second skill is only good on Vanguard Circle, and it reads, when his attack hits on Vanguard Circle, counterblast 1, discard 2 cards, and you can restand him with Drive -1 once per turn. So, good on that aspect, good restanding, good pressure play, but aside from that, the other grade 3 I'm going to come up with, which everyone knows at this point, is a little bit more usable in the mid to late game. Next up, 4 copies of Dragonic Waterfall. And you play him because you want to consistently ride him after your first grade 3 turn with Overlord. His skill, when he's placed on Vanguard Circle, you can choose one of your opponent's grade 2 or greater rear guards and retire it. So a good way to snipe an interceptor on place, and then his second skill, when he attacks, you can Soul Blast a grade 3 and give him plus 10k power, plus 1 critical, and Sentinel Guard Restrict for the rest of his battle. Now I'm going to explain why I play 3 copies of Dragonic Gaias. So you have Dragonic Gaias. When he boosts a grade 3 or greater unit, you can counterblast 1, push him to the soul, and give the boosted unit an additional critical. Since you're going to be using Dragonic Waterfall into your second and thereafter grade 3 turn, you're going to be looking at a 43, 53, 63, 73k attack with Waterfall, and having an inherent crit already makes giving an additional crit with Gaias a 3 total critical attack. So your opponent could have somehow miraculously healed down to 2 damage. With Gaias behind Waterfall, you're forcing 3 damage on an attack that your opponent can't use perfect guards on. So you're going to be forcing them to use hard shield to stop it. And even if they're at 2, they're going to want to, or if they can't, they're going to be begging that you don't hit a critical trigger on your drive check so that they can actually live. And that is exactly why I play Gaias at 3 copies. And 4 copies of Waterfall, of course. Now lastly, for grade 3s, most builds play 4 and 4, but I like to play the 1 copy of Vortex Dragon. because his second skill is exactly like Bellicosity's. When your opponent's rearguard is retired during your turn, he gets plus 5k power until the end of that turn. The big difference between Vortex Dragon and Bellicosity, Vortex can already hit. Bellicosity needs to at least proc once in order to hit without a booster. Vortex can hit without a booster by itself, and his skill procs to make shield value guard-wise that much more important. Each time he procs, he puts on that much more shield pressure. So his first attack requires 5k, a single proc forces a 10k, a second proc 15, and then third 20, and so on. So he already forces guard where Bellicosity does not. And his first skill is a little bit of a troll skill. You can use it in the very end game if you want to, just because it's that trolly. An X skill that's once per turn. You can counterblast 2, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. Then, if you have 5 cards in your damage zone, discard all cards in your hand and retire all of your opponent's rear guards. So you're looking at potential plus 25k to Vortex Dragon. So in the end game, when you have like 3 or 4 or 5 gift markers, you're looking at 38 plus k attack, or 48 plus k attack. So really solid for just power buffs and synergistic with the power scaling that I'm going for in terms of forcing certain amounts of shield value. And that is it for my Overlord deck profile for Standard. So again, if you guys thought it was pretty insightful in terms of how you go about deck building, definitely be sure to leave a like. And if you want more content from me, be sure to click that subscribe button so you guys can get all the updates from me going forward. That is it for this video. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.